Good evening and welcome to the second edition of the GPVWC Podcast. Tonight we're on the eve of the start of the 2013 Super League season. We're going to go through each of the teams that are going to be competing and give our opinions and thoughts towards the upcoming season. Tonight I am joined again by Nick Rowland and Tom Parker, but also tonight I'm going to be joined by Scott Bennett, who is going to be driving the Super Cup but is the test driver for Carnow Sport. And we have one of the championship contenders on board with us tonight with Lee Morris, who will be driving for Northern Racing. Good evening, gents.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hello. Right, we're going to start off with Midnight Motorsports, who of course are the team's champions from last year, and they will be driving with the world champion Lucas Euler, and this year he'll be partnered by the man who finished in second place in the Super Cup, Alex Cooper. They will have James Shepherd as their test driver. Nick Rowland is vacating the seat and will be heading operations from up above for the upcoming season. So, going to go to Tom first. Can we look at anyone other than Midnight for the championship this year?
I think it's hard to look past them, really, isn't it? I mean, you've got names. You've obviously got Lee. You've obviously got Dave. You've obviously got some bloody quick drivers in this league, but their work ethic and their commitment is just ridiculous, isn't it? I've never seen anything like it in any sort of game, let alone sim racing. It's impressive, to say the least, so I don't think I can see anything past the Team's Championship. Drivers' Championship, however, though. Well, it's interesting. I don't know, obviously Lucas is obviously expected to beat Alex, I think, in many parts of the league, but I think Alex has got something up his sleeve. It'd be interesting. I'm not sure what other people think about that, but Alex could be a very big shock.
Yeah, I've obviously a race against Alex last year in the Super Cup, and he's a very quick driver, and he obviously has one race win to his name. I'm sure he'd like to have a race win next season where he finishes across the line first. But I definitely think in terms of a driver lineup, it's an extremely strong one there, and I actually would like to think that Alex, once he gets settled into things and driving the Super League car more often, he's going to get stronger and stronger. You look at the way he started the Super Cup season last year, that he wasn't right up there to start, but as the season got on, he became a much more well-rounded driver, and at times he was really showing the way for across the field. Lee, you raced against Lucas last year. Do you think that someone like Alex can really challenge him?
Without being in the team, it's hard to say because you can't really see what's going off. Obviously, you don't know if Lucas has got sort of number one status or anything like that. I presume that he would, but without being in the team, it's hard to say. We didn't really see him pitch together, obviously, last year at any time because obviously they were just test drivers and race driver in respect. And obviously, Alex was in Super Cup and Lucas was in Super League, so there's no real way of telling.
Yeah. What about you, Scott? What are your opinions on Midnight Motorsports?
I expect them to walk it, to be honest. They've got so much behind them already. The expectations for them, it's a matter of can they match the domination of.
Yeah, but would you not think now with how strong the Super League is, but not just when you look at the likes of Nordstrom with their driver lineup, but you've got other teams in there and other drivers that you probably feel that we should see a closer run championship, hopefully.
Yeah, the field of drivers out there is credible, really, and the quality there. But you've got to look at the Midnight car was as developed as it could be really early on last season. So they've got so much R&D and finances backed up from not being able to spend it last year that they just they've got quite a big advantage over everyone. After a few races have gone by in this season.
Okay, so that would appear to be rather simple. I think most people are in agreement here that Midnight are going to win. Any objections to that?
Yes.
I was waiting for it.
We knew it was coming.
Yeah. Right. Where do you think they're going to falter then, Lee?
I wouldn't like to say they're going to falter. I just think that some of us might be able to at least challenge them, let's say. I don't think they're going to walk it like last year, especially after mid-season. I think you'll see a lot of teams catch up.
Yeah, I agree with Lee. I really, really, really want someone to challenge them. No, I haven't got anything against the guys. They're lovely guys. I mean, they're awesome, but I just, for the sake of the championship, really, I want a closer one. I know Dave ran them close at the end of last season, but I just want to see some more competition. I don't want to see a boring 1-2 like we saw sometimes last year, and it was just got a bit tedious in it, really. I think most people will agree. It's got boring, but I mean, if someone like Lisa can just challenge them, it'd make it a lot more exciting from a viewer's point of view, anyway.
Yeah, although I'm sure one person in this podcast would gladly like boring processional 1-2. So isn't that right, Nick?
I'd love it. I'd absolutely love it. I have to agree with what Lee said, though, mostly. I think he's got it spot on, is the fact that the teams, due to the way the upgrade system works now, I think there's teams like Norwegian and Woods, for example, will push Midnight, my team, close a lot more so than what happened last season. Granted, we are starting with a very good base, but even come rounds, I think it was even Monaco for the past 2 or 3 seasons, it's always been quite a pivotal point in the season. I think once again, Monaco will be that pivotal point of the season. And if teams such as Norwegian, and we all know just how capable both Dave and Lee are around Monaco, then I think you potentially could see Lucas and Alex pushed to the very, very limit. But I have absolutely full faith that both of them can push each other towards the title again. In terms of what Lee said, though, on the team orders front, I've called it same as what I did last year. Even though I was driving, I'm still doing the same again. So we will only implement it if it really comes down towards a championship hunt between them. Other than that, they are free to race.
That's good to know. I'm sure everyone will be glad to hear that when we be watching the races going on. Right, so that's Midnight Motorsport. So going on, we're going to go on to the second team, which is Green Stripes Racing. They're entering their second year in the Super League, and they had a brilliant year last year, mainly because of the performances of Dave Carr-Smith. Dave, of course, has left the team, and he's been replaced by David Gaspers, who raced for the second half of the season in the Formula Challenge last year. His partner is going to be Christoph Liechtenstein, former Super Cup champion, and he raced on and off. He shared the seat last year with Matt Klipp, who returns as the test driver. So, last year, second, great season for the team, great way to introduce himself for the Super League, but you've got to ask, after losing Dave Carr-Smith, can they really match it again this year? Scott, going to start with you.
It's a tough one, really. Dave did a lot for that team last year, so I've said it several times that it was a big blow losing him. But Gaspers is certainly a person with pace, but I've not seen much of him over longer distances. I did hear rumours of him being more of a hot lap kind of driver. But if he could turn that into a regular pace over a long distance, he could certainly do well for the team. Christoph has always been reliable, so he's always going to be thereabouts in hopefully getting in a few points team. So anything can happen, really.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to Tom, because Tom obviously worked a little bit with Gaspers last year. Gaspers was, for a time, was the test driver for Woods Racing and competed for the team in Brazil, I believe, when Kieran Ryan was unavailable. Tom, is there anything you can let us know about Gaspers' work ethic and his ability to perform for a team? At least, especially compared to someone like Dave Carr-Smith, who the team have lost.
Well, yeah. I mean, I must give it to David Gaspers. He did, when we did Brazil, when we were racing, we did do a lot of testing. But apart from that, yeah, he's got pace. I think, like Scott said, he's got pace. But I think maybe he's a bit more of a hot lapper. I mean, when we got to Brazil last year, I was expecting him. I think most people were expecting him to destroy me when we got to it. But I ended up out qualifying him and beating him. But it might have been he had a bad day, it might have been I had a good day, I don't know, but it's a tough one with David. He's quick, I mean, there's no doubt about it, but quick enough maybe to retain second in the championship, I don't think so.
Yeah, and would anyone think that, I suppose, from a team owner, I'm trying to put a team owner hat on for a second here, would Christoph kind of think, maybe I try and find someone quick to try and keep the team up there? You look at that lineup and we think that Gaspers would be a quick guy, and while Christoph is solid, he probably doesn't have the pace of some of the other guys around him, that maybe trying to find a quicker driver in that second seat would be the way to go. But that would be one school of thought, and it's probably something that could hurt Green Stripe Racing. Lee, how would you assess Green Stripes Racing going into this season?
Well, it was a team. It was a potential team that I was going to be driving for in 2013. I did get offered a drive by Christoph, but I just weighed up my options, and Nordstrom seemed a better bet. But looking at Green Stripes, they were one of the contenders for me because of the setup they've got. I mean, they're going to be very strong this year. They should have a very good car early on. Purely because of what Dave did for him last year. Like everyone says, he did a superb job, and I think that's going to carry on into 2013. Looking at Gaspers, I think everyone was surprised in Brazil in some respects. Like Tom said, no disrespect to Tom, but everyone expected Gaspers to be right up there in the Woods car because it was quite a good car. But he didn't really do the job like he'd done in, for example, Formula Challenge. He was really, really quick in that. But I think he can be a potential podium contender if he gets accustomed to the mod and so forth. But we'll just have to see, I guess. But he's definitely one guy I'd say look out for race wins possible.
Indeed. And what would you think on Green Stripes, Nick?
I'm going to be a little bit harsh here, and I think he's made a mistake. I don't think he should have put himself back into the second seat. With the car they now have, they needed two strong drivers to almost replicate what Dave did last year. I know that sounds incredibly harsh to Christoph, but he needed someone who was quicker to put that car higher up, like Dave was doing last year, to have someone alongside him. So Gaspers being one is great, because he has the qualifying ability especially, so you might be able to do something at the start. But he needed someone stronger alongside of him to get the points more consistently, to push the GSR back up higher like it was last year. You almost need two drivers to replace Dave. I've just made Dave sound really, really awesome there.
It's not that good.
But in some respects, and I think that's where he's actually made the mistakes. Getting Gaspers was great, but he needed someone else with a much more core depth and core consistency. And I know it sounds harsh for Christoph himself, but I don't think they'll be able to replicate it even slightly, if I'm totally honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, saying what Nick said, really, but I think maybe even Matt would have been a better choice. I mean, I think Matt has got pace in him. I think Matt isn't that bad a driver. When you compare him to Christoph, I think he is the better driver, so I don't see why Christoph's put Matt into the test driver and put himself in second driver when he himself has acknowledged that Matt's probably the quicker driver. It's a weird situation, but I mean, Matt must have his reasons for not wanting to do Super League, so every man to their own, I suppose.
I think with that as well, Matt is a good driver, but again, he's one of those developing drivers. Matt almost needs to go alongside someone like Lee, where Lee can bring the best out of him and then let him move on. I don't think Matt's at that point yet, so putting Matt staying in Super Cup almost makes a little bit more sense, unless someone takes him under their wing to push him that little bit higher up.
I think the big problem with when you could starting to see how the driver market was falling into place for this season, you could tell that there was a lot of drivers that were looking at it and thinking, no, I'm not going to touch a Super League, that is far too tough.
Yeah, I know,
don't
we had that
blame
problem.
them,
Yeah.
just looking at the field, it's an incredible field. One of the reasons I decided, no, I'm not going near that.
You swine, how could you? But yeah, the driver market was ridiculous. I mean, we at Woods, I think it's safe to say we were. I think everyone was going for Dave. I think it's just say. I'm not afraid to say.
We didn't.
Everyone except Halcyon. Everyone except Halcyon went for Dave.
No, we didn't either. He's crap.
Shut up. Well, yeah, we didn't really. We were just trying to bitch him, but most teams went for Dave. He was driver everyone wanted. Nordstrom got him. Fair play to Nordstrom, but. Yeah, it was tough, but after him, James Shepherd was another one we looked at, but he decided to go to Midnight. I think, like Scott said, people are just looking at Super League and going, "Oh, damn, why don't I do that?" It's a shame in a way, but I think the field we've got is a strong one. It's the strongest we've ever had, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go around to each of you and you can give me, in a couple of words, just where you think Green Stripes are going to be. Nick?
Battling towards the lower end this season.
All right, Scott?
Oh, that's a tough one, really.
I said a few words.
I'd go with just creeping into the top 10s for race finishes would be decent for them.
All right. Tom?
If I say championship position, 7th, maybe pushing the top 5, but yeah, like Scott, top 10 finishes.
Right, and finally Lee.
The high end of the midfield.
Right. Okay, so that's Green Stripes Racing. We're moving on to Hawkeye Racing. They will be lining up with Lewis Redshaw and Bart DeVos. This will sound pretty similar because that's what they started last year with. But of course, they didn't finish that way, which saw James Shepherd into the team midway through the season, and which saw a pretty hefty surge up through the field that eventually saw them finishing third overall. James has left, but it's back to Redshaw and DeVos, with Rick Scott going to be the reserve driver again. So, gentlemen, I'm going to start off this time with Lee. What's your thinking with Hawkeye Racing?
I'm not really sure about the team as such because I don't know, obviously how much cash they've got and R&D points and so on. So we don't know how good the car's going to be. But the two drivers are very, let's say, complete drivers. Probably mistake-free drivers. Seen a couple of mistakes in Supercup over years from both of them, but that's when they were pushing for championships. With the I can't actually remember what team it was, the Malta Force team. I remember watching the Super Cup in 2011, I think it was. Regarding the drivers, yeah, they're pretty good, solid drivers, so they should be somewhere near the top 10, if the car's good enough.
Yeah. Nick, when you kind of look at it, that they started off with Redshaw and DeVos, but obviously the lineup got a bit mixed up because of, I think Bart had some issues with computers. I saw James coming in. But you think they might have wanted to freshen things up a little bit going into the new season rather than returning to what they had last year?
Possibly so, yeah. But I think Bart has always shown an amazing amount of potential, and I don't always think he's quite done that final delivery for them. But he is a very, very good driver. And Lewis has come on really well in the past 2 years. I remember how well he did in Race of Champions 2 years ago, and into last year he did quite well. And even the pre-season testing results, Lewis has been pushing right towards the top. So Lewis, I think both drivers have actually come on quite a lot, and that could be quite a solid little team that they've got going on there. I think the thing that maybe their downfall, it's the development route. I believe they had difficulties last year, and as long as they get that right, then Lewis and Bart, I actually think they're more likely to be the team pushing the top teams like GSR were last year. I think Hawkeye have got more of that potential, and they'd be up towards the podium places.
Yes, that is exactly what I was going to say. That's Nick just said my part for me. Thanks.
Welcome.
Or would you like to add anything more if you got anything else written down in your notes?
Yeah, but just echo what Nick said. But I really think Bart is going to push for a podium in Melbourne. I think Bart and Lewis are going to be there. One of them will be on the podium in Melbourne. I think a lot of people are expecting Midnight to be 1-2, but I really can see one of those Hawkeyes on the podium. They look immense. They look ridiculously quick, and I think I've heard some things that they've actually got quite a few RD points. I'm not too sure, but I mean they must be rich. I mean look at James. James did a lot of work for them last year in terms of getting points money, and I think it's going to pay off for them. I really can see Hawkeye pushing the top 3 this season in the championship, and maybe even races. And like Lee said, maybe if someone can push them, why not race wins? I mean, Bart's proven before he's quick, and so is Lewis. I mean, Lewis in Super Cup, he was ridiculously quick. I mean, he won about 3 or 4 races in a row at one point in 2011. So they're both good drivers, and I think it'll be interesting to see how they do this year.
It's exactly that. You can see that this team's got a good base for the season, and there are 2 drivers there that can regularly push other people in the league as well as themselves. They'll beat them. They'll improve on themselves race after race. Particularly like this preseason. I mean, you saw Lewis last year having some really regular finishes in the tail end of the points. I think he got up to a 6th place at the end of the season, and now his times in the preseason testing been even better than that at the start of this season. So I think he's going to be one to watch. Bart has always been quick. Still quick now, so it's going to be definitely a one to watch for them.
Yeah, I think Lewis maybe struggled a bit under James, maybe where James was doing so well he couldn't find performance. But like Scott said, towards the end of the year, I think it's safe to say he got his act together. He really did start getting quite quick. So Lewis and Bart, yeah, they will be the ones to watch.
I'm going to say just one thing to add to that as well, which is always a strong point to any lineup, is the fact that they've worked together in the past. They've won championships together in the past, so they know how each other work, which is really good. That's a good strength for a team.
Okay, so I think they're pretty good consensus there is that Hawkeye are going to be a team that are going to be challenging maybe not for top honours, but they will be up and around sniffing for podiums and probably there for when the others falter, they're going to be there to snap up. And that could be a big thing when it comes to the championship. If we have the likes of Bart and Lewis up there that could maybe take points off when the championship contenders actually have a bad day. Right, okay, so that was Hawkeye Racing. We're going to move on to the former teams champions of 2011, which is the Red Archer Virtual Racing Team. They will be returning this year with David Junt in the car, and filling in for the second seat this year will be Jason Muscat, who returns to the team after a spotty year in Super Cup. And by spotty, I mean the fact that his internet connection was the case. Obviously, last year they started the season with Yanni Taskinen, the former champion in that car, and then they had OJ Clark, but OJ has since moved on to focus on his studying. And this team recently lost their car via a lovely video during the week. And can they really bounce back up to the top? They've big hopes for this car, but does anyone actually think here that they can?
No. Simple as. I don't think. No disrespect, but I don't think Red Archer will be improving on their placement last year. I just can't see it.
Well, what is there anything specific that you want to point out now, Tom?
I don't know. I think it's partially the league. I mean, how strong it's become. There's lots of drivers, like we said earlier, lots of drivers coming in looking very quick. Partially down to driver lineup weakness. I don't think it's one of the strongest lineups they've ever had. David, obviously, last year had one of the best cars, and he didn't exactly. I think even he himself will say he didn't exactly hoped. Jason, obviously, he had lots of problems with his connection. But I think that's sorted now, so it'll be interesting to see how Jason does. But I just can't see them being back up there, and I don't think they've got much money either. So I think it's going to be a tough season for Red Archer.
I have to agree with that as well, because if you look at 2011, they had a by far superior car mid-season, and they were challenging for race wins with us, but we didn't realise how good that car was until we actually drove it. This is when I was driving for Drake. And when we got in the Red Archer car, it was just like instantly 1.5 seconds faster than anything we could do on the first lap. And it was like, this is how good their car is, this is why they're winning races. Now, basically, when you win races, generally you get a bit more confidence when you start doing well and win your races, your confidence goes up. But if you notice with Jason and especially David Junt, after that season in 2011, last year he just sort of came back down to earth and he was absolutely nowhere. I mean, towards the end of the season he picked up a little bit again, fair enough. I'm not having to go at any of them, it's just... Even after the race wins, they didn't really seem to gain anything from it, and sort of bring them to a new level. They just stayed at the same level they were before. So without the car, I don't think they'll do much.
Yeah, what Lee said about the car, I mean, that's when I drove for Norton towards the tail end of the season. I know the Norton was a good car, but it was superior over race distance. In qualifying, I remember in Spain, I think everyone remembers that. Me and Joe got 1-2, and then we got to the race, we just couldn't keep with them. We had to do an extra stop because of the tyres. They were just superior. It was a brilliant car. But this year, without that car, they're going to be able to sustain it. I don't know.
And it can't be helped that these two, as we read in the forums, were having consistent problems trying to get everything working and perfectly. That can't be really helpful when you're trying to prepare for a season. And when we did see them on live racers, that they were packing in a lot of laps, and then you come to pre-season and suddenly you're getting a bunch of error messages up and no real perfect solutions for it. Scott, you're someone who has a bit of experience in that regard of having errors pop up and not really getting them that other people are getting them.
I can't find it hard to compare because some of my errors, I don't even understand how I fix them. I reboot and it's fine. But Jason has had a string of errors with the new weather system that we're using, and nobody seems to have a real solution for that, but I believe he's got it working to some extent right now, but it's a matter of whether that holds out for him. He's had so much bad luck with his internet connection and errors popping up, yet we know he's a quick driver, so I think that's going to be a bit of a pain for him if it starts coming back to haunt him later in the season.
Yeah, last thing you want is, especially when we were talking about 90-minute races, if you get 60 minutes into it and suddenly something pops, whether it's going to be the plug, something to do with the game, or whether it's going to be his internet connection, he's definitely walking a tightrope there. Nick, we'll go to you. What are your own thoughts there on Red Archer? Can they relive the glory days, or are they going to be stuck in the midfield, you reckon?
I've just got feeling the way this is going on, the harsh one all night. I just think they've got it wrong again. I think they've got two wrong drivers for that car. I think they've got the development wrong for the last year. They came off the back of a championship year, well overspent in their championship year, and they really didn't need to. Overspent again last year and was nowhere near where they were in 2011. And I think their resources now are so depleted with two drivers, with one that disconnects all the time. So I think they're constantly fighting a losing battle, to be quite honest with you. And I really don't see them do anything this year. And that's my harsh mode off.
No, don't forgive the harsh mode. It makes for an interesting podcast. It makes for a debate. That's what we want to hear. We want your honest, frank opinions. That's what we're here for. We're not here to bullshit over things. Right, so Red Archer, I'm going to go around to each of you because I think we all had varying opinions on it to give our opinions. I'm going to go around. Tom, where do you reckon Red Archer are going to end up?
I think it's going to be towards the back of the field, really.
All right,
maybe 10th, yeah.
And Scott?
If on a good day, a top 10, tail end of the points.
Right. Lee, where do you see Red Archer?
Midfield.
And I think Nick is pretty sure. What do you reckon, Nick?
Yeah, towards the back with the odd good result, possibly.
Okay. So, that's our boys' view on the Red Archer virtual racing team. Now, we move on to the sleeping giants, as it were, of Norton Racing, the team owned by the administrator Will Ponisi. This year, brand new driver lineup with Dave Carr-Smith and Lee Morris. Rather a bit of a dream team there with Pavel Lagnovsky as the backup. One thing I will say myself on Norton going into this season, it's the first year in a long, long time that they've actually come out with number one drivers, let's say, in their camp. Last few years, I know I've looked over Norton. I remember trying to write a pre-season article last year for it, and I was starting off going that there was always one good driver and one either so-so driver or it's going to be one that's going to be swapped in and out. They've never really had two strong drivers, so it'll actually be interesting to see how the personalities bounce off each other going into this season. But definitely, I would be thinking myself, Norton are going to be the closest challengers to midnight. So we're going to start with Nick. You're possibly
you had to, didn't you?
Oh yeah, why not? Well, sure, they're going to be your closest challengers, possibly. So we might as well go to you first.
All right,
Get the hash mark back on.
I know they're both listening as well, but who cares? This has got a recipe for disaster or greatness. How it goes, I really, really don't know. I've worked with Lee for many, many years, and he is just an outstanding driver. I take nothing away from him. Lee, I'll be honest, your temperament can get away with you sometimes, but other than that, it is just superb. And Dave, the way he's come on, especially last year, I don't know where the hell he found all that pace, to push Lee the way he is already by the looks of it from the testing results. I think the one big thing for this year is Lee has got a teammate that can push him for the first time, I think I would say, that can really genuinely push him. And that is a new challenge for Lee. And from speaking to him in the past, that drives him more than anything. I know people have doubted him because of would he quit because Dave might be quicker. Rubbish in my regard. Lee would want to battle Dave to the death, especially seeing as they're in the same team and the same car. So I think it has the recipe to be disaster and also greatness. Which one? It will just depend on how their relationship actually works.
Yeah, well, obviously we saw, not last year, was it, when Lee was having his battle with Joe for the title, it seemed like each other were spurring each other on, and that brought out the best in both drivers as the season went on. Tom, what are your opinions as a former Norton racing driver?
If anyone has to challenge Midnight, this is the team. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that these two are going to. It's the strongest pair on the grid. I think even Nick would probably even agree. It's the strongest pair on the grid. Nick and Lee are probably two of the best drivers in the league. I mean, if you gave them a Midnight car, they'd win. They'd get a 1-2 every race, in my opinion. Those two, I mean, they're ridiculously quick. Dave, like Nick said, came on last year from nowhere and got 5-6 wins in a row in a GSR. I mean, what happened? And then we got Lee, obviously, who's proven time and time again he's probably, in my opinion, the best driver in the league. So it'd be interesting. But like Nick said, if Lee gets his temperament wrong, sorry mate, but if the temperament's wrong, maybe it could be disastrous. But I don't see it happening. I think these two, I think maybe even dark horses for the title. I mean, what else can you say? These two really are ridiculously quick, and I think everyone else will agree with me. These two probably are the two to give the fight to Alex and Lucas at midnight, and we will. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Oh, you might know what else to say, but I'm going to go to Scott, and I'm sure he's going to fill us with some dead air there. So, what do you reckon, Scott?
They're going to be incredibly hard to beat. Other than the Midnight's going to be pushed by these two. I mean, Midnight may have the backing of like the resources from last year that Norwegian might not have, but as you saw last year with the Green Stripes, they were a brand new team, and yet they managed to finish second. So it shows what a decent driver can do, and one of them drivers was, of course, Dave. So Midnight they do have to watch the backs, and they can't get lazy with these two on the grid.
Right, I'm just going to go to Lee for his own opinions on Norwegian. I suppose after coming from years after being with Drag, what's the feeling like to be, for lack of a better term, to be in, I suppose, a team that probably has more direction, given how Drake was going in the last years particularly?
I think you're spot on with that assessment there. Is basically when I was at Drake, I always felt like I was leading the team. I mean, there's no disrespect to Mike and so on. Obviously, he had some issues, which meant I did end up leading the team for the part of last year. But even before that, I was always sort of leading the team, which is a role I do enjoy. But that's alludes back to something Nick's just said, is the fact that I lead the team because no one else can. Now I've got a teammate who can. We're going to be very evenly matched in that role. And at the moment, I'd probably say Dave's leading the team. Because so far in pre-season testing, I mean, the times are representative. No one was sandbagging as such, in terms of each other's trying. And he was very quick. He's really surprised me so far this season, as Dave. And that's only in testing. I expected him to be quicker than the last time we raced together. But I thought last year's wins were due mainly down to the car, and that's no disrespect to Dave, but I thought the wins came from the car, not him personally. After driving with him in 4 tests, the last 3, he's, I think, been quicker than me in every single one. Not fully happy with the car yet, but that's a different story, that you've got to drive around them problems, and Dave's just doing a better job of that. Team-wise, it's just great to be in a team that has so much direction, like you say, to actually know that you're going into a race with support and you know what the car can do. We've got the resource. The resource coming from managing Drake to hearing what Nordstrom has is just like, there's just one word and it's wow. It's like, how on earth did we survive at Drake with what we had?
I think most people are asking that, Lee.
Sorry, Tom?
I think most people are asking that, Lee. How the hell did you survive at Drake? Jesus.
Well, that was for one of the reasons, and this is one of the things I want to prove this year as well, is the fact that people seem to always mention my temperament, and that's a fair point, because last year I did really go off the leash, and obviously one of the people I aimed at these comments that I made last year was at Dave, and he's now my teammate, so I think that just shows you can build bridges in some respects, and people do understand that it was just pure passion and frustration that came out last year, as to the fact that once again I've been, well, let's say sold out by the team in some respects, but I really think this year we can do something different, and I really hope to prove to people that I'm not this sort of arrogant, I don't want to use the words, person in the league, who just thinks he's better than everyone else, because that's simply not the case. I have a lot of self-confidence, and I know I can get the job done in a car that's not always the best, which I've proven before, and Dave's the same as me in that as well. But this year I just really want to prove that I'm a good driver, but also I can do other things. For example, last year I did the broadcasts and so on, and I really enjoyed doing that, putting something back into the league. And in other leagues recently, I've had much success, and I'm not like I was last year, let's say, where the temperament was wrong. I think Dave can get the best out of me in that respect as well, because working with a teammate like him is very soothing.
Yeah, and I suppose even from your own point of view, like you said, last couple of years you've been stuck managing Drake as well as trying to drive and do different things like that. I suppose at least this year you can probably focus more just on driving and probably even enjoy the whole thing a bit more, rather than trying to be balancing this, that and the other, and trying to keep a team running as well as try to be quick.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, I was accused of being a control freak last year by a few people, which really annoyed me, because I had no choice, you know what I mean? I didn't choose to take over Drake, and I don't choose to take over any team. I'm not a control freak, and one of the reasons I scrapped my own team is people may recall I did actually launch my own team last year, Morris Grand Prix, but I suddenly realised about a month into the Morris Grand Prix project, I mean, I'd done a lot of work on it as well, and I suddenly realised I'm not a manager, I'm a driver, you know, I want to go out and race, I don't want to be... I mean, I do like to get involved with that sort of stuff because it's something that you can really, if you understand it better, you know, if you understand the principle of the car better and the mod and the behind the scenes things, it really can improve you as a driver. But I do like to get involved, but I don't want to be in charge. I want to be, you know, my own free spirit on track and then let someone else sort all that sort of stuff out.
Yeah, no, it's something I myself can relate to. It's just that I tried to dabble a little bit in team management last year and some of like the World Sports Series and stuff like that. And I kind of just got to a point, I was like, I put all this effort to try and get it started, and then when you kind of get into it, it's like thinking, well, I'd rather be on the track. So, I mean, I can completely agree with you on that point of view.
Yeah.
Right, okay, well, that was Northern Racing. I'm sure we should probably put in a call to HBO because I'm sure a fly-on-the-wall documentary would be a pretty good thing in that team now going forward. So, we're going to move on down to Nizo Racing. They were a bit of a surprise package last year, mainly because of Ruud Heesterbeek in the car, who did a fair amount of their point scoring. This year he's going to be joined by fellow Dutch driver and I believe a friend of his, Tom van der Voort. Not a lot is known about him, but he's been rather quick in pre-season testing and his friend of Ruud, so we can assume Chris would be signing someone who'd be pretty quick. Can Nizo move up the grid is probably the big question going forward, and with two strong drivers with them. I'm going to start off with Scott.
Ruud is incredibly quick, as proven last season. We've not seen much from Tom, but other than times in testing, have certainly shown that he can be as good as Ruud. So they're going to be good, but how good, I'm not sure yet.
Right, what do you reckon yourself, Tom?
Yeah, Tom's a unknown, isn't he? He only came into the league, 3 or 4 weeks ago, just before we started testing, so not much is known about him, other than the fact he's Ruud's mate. But like Scott said, he's done some impressive times in testing, and from what I can see on the live races, he's not done a bad time either on the on Melbourne in the Super League car. I think it's on the 27.5 or something like that, which isn't 27.2, which isn't bad, and that's top of the time so far. So Nijo are an interesting one. I mean, last year obviously Ruud carried that team quite a lot. I know Ben scored a point in Monza, but yeah, I think it's safe to say Ruud carried that team. But now they've got two drivers. One, if Tom is as good as Ruud is, I mean, we could be looking at the same situation as Hawkeye. I mean, could they be challenging the top three? I mean, from what we saw last year, Nijo, they had the pace and the car wasn't the best, but Ruud brought the best out of it. And had he had a better car, who knows? He might have been up there with Dave and Lee and Lucas and etc. So, but it's one of those ones you have to wait and see. I can't really put my finger on where they're going to finish, but I'd like to think they could be up there with Hawkeye.
Yeah, I suppose Nizo are actually a team that a lot of teams could aspire to, because obviously in the 2011 season they were Paddy last, so
yeah,
and they got themselves up there. And I suppose one thing about their driver lineup is, it could have been very easy for Chris to decide, okay, I'm going to take that second seat, like we were talking about with Green Stripes Racing, where Christoph has decided, but he held out and he managed to finally get his driver. Although I do know that, Chris was scrambling for a driver for quite a while. That's why they didn't have Tom in the first test. Chris had to sign himself to an emergency contract to get himself in the car for. Actually, it wasn't an emergency contract. He signed himself briefly to a full-time contract to take part in the test. So they were very late in announcing their second driver. Nick, where do you see Nizo ending up?
I think Chris has done some good business actually in being able to retain Ruud, because I believe he had a couple of offers. So retaining Ruud was really massive, and now Tom's been drafted in. I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Tom at all. Like pretty much all of us. The times have been impressive. The only one thing I saw that may be their Achilles heel is I noticed they weren't brilliant, either of them, massively in the wet. I don't know if they'll actually struggle when it comes to the wet conditions. But nevertheless, I think Nijo are going to be a very strong team. And if Ruud and Tom can actually push each other in a similar sort of fashion, the way that Dave and Lee can, then Nijo will be higher up the grids and Chris will be laughing.
Indeed. Have you any thoughts on Nijo, Lee?
Well, I seem to recognise Tom from somewhere. I've seen that name before, and I really can't think where. As I know a few other people in the league have said as well. And Histerbeek, I'd like to be in an equal car with him actually, just see how good he is, because I don't know. Last year he did some really good drives towards the end of the season. He was really quick with a car that wasn't really the best. It was very close to ours. This is when we was in the drag, and he was in front of us and racing us. So he's definitely very quick, but maybe he can spring a surprise as well. I think he's definitely another contender for the podium.
Yes, but the one thing they're going to have to watch out for is to make sure that Tom gets all the support he can to get used to the little nooks and crannies of the GPVWC. Because if he was to bolt, like we'd seen the likes some people do last year after they didn't never settled, they would have to rely either on Chris coming in or their new test driver Martin O'Connor. So suddenly, if that was to happen, suddenly your driver lineup suddenly gets very devalued very quickly. Right. So next, move on to Kernow Sport. They were another new team like GSR last year and enjoyed a great year, much thanks to having Simon Cattell in the car. We also saw a number of fairy tale performances from team owner Mark Wicks. So this will be the first time since 2005 that Mark Wicks has not actually driven in the car or in the Super League at all. So he'll be stepping down to the Super Cup next year. In his place, he's brought two new GPVWC rookies in the form of Steve Roy of Belgium and Mark Johnston from Northern Ireland. So Tom, what do you reckon we're going to see from Kernow Sport this year?
Kernow, they're another one, but I think they're in a similar boat to Nijo, really, except for the fact that Rude's a bit more established while Steve and Mark aren't. Mark Johnston is a bit like Tom. We don't know much about him. He came in quite in the last minute, and it's hard to tell with Mark. He doesn't look too bad in pace-wise, but Steve, he looks quick. Steve does look quick. He has been quite quick in testing time so far. He's I think Lee and Dave have raced with him before, so they may know a little bit more about him than I do. And then you've got Scott, who, okay, he may not be the quickest driver in the team, but he knows about setups. He does know what he's talking about when it comes to setups. So having Scott there will be, I think, maybe a game changer in terms of their season.
Right. Just Lee, would you know Steve Roy? Have you raced against him before?
Yeah, a long time ago was the last time I raced against Steve properly. He used to run his own league. It was called Ted Racing. This was about 7 years ago on F1 Challenge. And when I first joined that league, I was terrible at driving. Absolutely terrible. And he was like one of the leading drivers I learnt a lot off. The only problem with Steve I've found over the last few years is he's very quick, but makes a lot of mistakes when he's doing well, which is a shame.
Right. So that's something to look at least that's a little bit of a form guide possibly for people to watch out for. Not a lot to be said about Mark Johnston. I know I spoke with Mark a number of times about his driver lineup, and he was very cautious about letting anything be slip on it. But he'd always said he had people lined up, and I know he brought Mark Johnston over from Race to Play. I know that Mark runs with Phoenix, a team we'll be talking about a little bit later on over there. So I was assuming he was going to be trying to sneak one of their drivers in through the back door sort of thing. So I was surprised. I've tried to look at Mark Johnston. He seems to have a decent record, but obviously we don't know what he's going to be like until we hit the track. He's one of a number of Irishmen actually on the grid. We've gone from one last year, and we have 3 racing and one in reserve. So we've got we're well represented on the grid at least this year. Nick, what do you think yourself about Kernow Sport? Are they going to be going upwards, or are they going to be sliding back?
I think they'll do actually quite well this year. Steve, as Lee said, Steve, I first saw him in TED as well, but very towards the end of TED when they'd switched over to RFATs, and it's where I first actually met Lee also. So I saw him a little bit later on then, and he kind of took a break then from then onwards. But Steve has always been quick. It's his mistakes that has lost him, as Lee pointed out, he is a bit mistake prone. But the only concern I have for the team overall is the consistency of both drivers, and I don't mean in terms of their pace, in actually turning up. Mark was in GPO, and I remember he was there for a period of time and then just disappeared. And I know Steve, he's raced a couple of times in GPO also and just disappeared. So I think that maybe the only slight problem that they may have there is the attendance as such. as long as that works, I think they will have a very good year.
I suppose one thing they have going for them, let's say, to Nito or just ahead of them, is that in terms of the reserve drivers, they do have a strong stock in with Scott here, and obviously Mark can always pull himself back up. I'm sure it's a situation he's going to want to avoid given the size of his wages, and if he was to come back up, he probably wanted to be more a long-term arrangement. So at least it should, Verloy or Johnson, turn out to be a bit flaky. They're covered off in that department. Scott, we'll go to you. You're driving for Carno. I have to ask, what kind of situation is you were one of the first guys to sign for the team, obviously in a reserve driver role, and then you end up with two guys that you probably don't know. It's probably a strange situation to probably find yourself in, to have two GPVWC rookies in your team, and you're the most senior guy in the team, I suppose, apart from Wixie.
I thought it was going to be weird at first when I heard that there was two complete unknowns coming to the team, but I can't really fault them for the enthusiasm that I've seen from them so far. I mean, it may not be appearing on the forums or whatnot, but behind the scenes in Kerr now, they've been really gaming up for it, and they're really have their mind set to it right now. So I've got a lot of faith in them so far. They seem to be really committed.
I think another thing that we haven't touched on is that I think maybe Phil touched on it earlier actually, if Wix does need to come back, from what I've heard, he's quick. I mean, we saw at the test session, I think it was Valencia, he has pace. I mean, we know Mark's quick, but should he be called upon, he could actually be a force to be reckoned with.
I will admit, I've seen some of Mark's behind-the-scenes testing, and it's breaking my heart that I'm in the test seat and not him.
Yeah, well, you're cheaper.
I just put something out there about Mark as well. I actually give him massive credit, because even though he's just come off the back of a struggling year, he's clearly seen how GPWC is evolving and progressing and moving forwards, and to question himself and drop himself backwards and put two, in his mind, quicker drivers in it, that's a massive thing. I mean, for a guy that's been around in the league so long, in my eyes, I think I give him huge credit for it. To say, okay, I'm not doing as well as I was. I'll put two new guys in, a bit of fresh blood, and I think that's testament to Mark and himself, and the fact he's done it in his own team as well. And if anything, they have one of probably the strongest reserve lineup, if anything. So if anything was to happen, there's four very solid drivers there that they can switch between. So I think Mark has done exceptionally well with what he's got there, and the resource, not in terms of R&D, but in terms of the actual driver base he has there also.
I think a lot of it may come from last season, where it did appear that Mark was struggling to get to grips with the mod, and it wasn't until the end of the season that he really started to pick up. But in this mod, it's a complete other story. He is right up there, even though he's not really appeared on the timesheets for other people to see. From what I've seen, it's disappointing to see him not even in the test seat.
Yeah, well, at least we'll get to see him in the Super Cup, and hopefully he gets great success. I mean, I've known Wixie since 2005. I was his teammate when he kind of returned. He was briefly in what was the F1 VWC back then, but he returned then for the end of the season. Two of us there in that shitbox of a woods, as Ollie knows, I commonly call our very first car back. And he's been around so long, and like you said, just to decide, okay, I'm not going to race, and he could have easily probably found a seat somewhere else, or on the grid, but no, he's going to focus on the team management. And even when I was chatting with him, I'm just trying to find out what he was going to be doing. He always had a plan. He's out for the team, for the engine. He's gone very prepared for someone who is pretty new to the team management. So hopefully it is going to be a good year for Carnow Sport. Right, we're going to move on, and we're going to move on to Woods Racing, who employ a certain Mr. Parker. He's returning for his second full season with the team, and he will be teaming up with Teemu Toika, who is replacing the outgoing Kieran Ryan. They'll be backed up by Ben Warren in a team that's got G-Proc written all over it.
Yeah.
There's a plug for you. Nick, can you see Woods return to the good old days, or where do you reckon that Parker and Toika are going to leave the team? Apart from the power.
That's true. I think they've got plenty of potential in the team, actually. Tom, again, I know he's here, but I think he's come on a lot in the past few years. He has driven with some established drivers, driven with new drivers, and I think he has really come forwards a lot. Tom, I think the only downside to you is that you let your head go too much when you should have more confidence in yourself. Because I think if you had that more confidence in yourself, and while the testing, that's maybe the most mundane thing you're ever going to do, it's the way you are going to improve even more. And having that self-confidence and the belief that you can push the team higher, presumably that you are the lead driver in the team, then I think you can lead that team much, much, much higher up the field. And then on the flip side with Timu has impressed us ever since he sorted out his connection. In fact, he's been a superb driver, but not so much when it's come to open wheel. He's been great in GTs and touring cars and everything, but there's still a question mark I find looms over his head with the open wheels. And so with the F1 car, I'm not too sure if he's going to be able to replicate it. If he can, Timu has got some bloody raw pace in him, really good pace. And he could be one to watch out for, challenging towards even the top 5 area along with Tom.
Yeah, well, obviously, maybe Woods need to hire a motivator, a psychologist there for Mr. Parker, keep him going. I know even before this broadcast, Tom was talking about a bit deflated, but I'm sure once we get the season going, the adrenaline going, we'll see happy Tom again, or at least he can hire his Italian cousin to get in there for him if he needs a bit of extra motivation. Lee, what are your opinions on Woods Racing going into the new season?
I'm not a. I mean, Tom's quick. Obviously, we've seen what he can do last year. Sometimes seen him in the past. He's pretty quick. So he can do the job. Tends to make a few too many mistakes. He's in a good position. I always remember Spain. I think it was 2011 with the Nordschon. He had a very good chance of second position and threw it all away with a few mistakes. So that's just one thing that comes to mind. But if he can sort the mistakes out, he'd be very quick. Timu, I just don't rate him. I mean, if he can improve this year, then fair enough. But I've never rated him. He just crashes and makes too many mistakes for my liking.
Yeah, well, that's obviously he's someone who's got to try and repair the damage to the reputation that he has for. I know some will point to a lot of it had to do with his lag and everything like that, but obviously it's going to be a year that, you know, I know Ollie has often talked about it, that he sees a team who could be what Tom was last year, that Tom came to the team with maybe not the highest bit of reputation going towards him, and over the course of the year managed to build something and looked a lot better by the end of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what Ollie's guiding hand, if Timu can be the next Parker or if he'll be the other lads. Scott, what are your opinions on Woods Racing? I know you would know these lads probably a bit more intimately than the rest of us would.
I think Parker did surprise a lot of people with his performances last season, and really did seem to be quite consistent with a lot of those results as well. Timu is the big factor here. He has such a reputation for causing havoc and shenanigans down the grid. But then towards the end of last season, he got a new internet connection, he got a new wheel, and it's like a different person's been driving ever since then. Just don't know what's come over him. He's been incredible since then, including that infamous Race of Champions defeat he had in the final.
Do you see it? Like, I mean, we're talking 90-minute races now. I know some of the WGT races I took part in were about an hour long, but we're talking about trying to maintain your concentration and a high level for 90 minutes. Can we see Timu do that?
It's true, we haven't seen much in the full race distance other than a few of the Super Cup performances, but even then he didn't appear much in them towards the end. The GTs is the best racing we got, and he did brilliantly in a couple of those races. Time will tell.
Right. Well, we'll finish Woods up with their lead driver, Tom Parker. You know, what are your opinions? I suppose, especially after the way last year went. I mean, there's got to be a buzz around Woods Racing going into this new season with the changes that have happened and the shake-ups to move this team forward. What's it been like in there?
Yeah, I think last season, from a personal point of view, was a fairy tale. I mean, I never expected to be top 15, top 20 in the championship, but then get top 10. But this season, yeah, we've got I think it's safe to say we've got a lot of RD points. We've got a good budget. I'd like to think our aim is to improve. I think we're not taking anything we're not going to go, we're going to go for top 5, we're going to go for top 4. We just want to improve. Last season, I think, as a team, we struggled a lot, but this season we have come prepared. We are aiming for a few top fives, maybe even, if we're lucky, a podium. If we're lucky, I'd stress if we're lucky.
Do you really think you can get a podium though? I know it's going to sound harsh, but when you look at Midnights, you look at Norgens, even like we've said with the Hawkeyes, maybe Gaspers and Heasterbeek, looking into a podium, that's a lot to ask for given the grid this year.
Yes, and I know a lot of people are going to say that, but I think it's going to go down to a development race, and I think if we can keep up like we have in the past, I mean, if you look at 2010, 2011, Woods had a very good car. Last year we had a very good car. It's just a shame that we couldn't make the most of it, myself and Kieran. But if we can keep up the development race, which we will be able to do this year, I am confident that we can possibly see one of myself, maybe Timu, on the podium. It's unlikely, like you said, there are lots of amazing drivers on the grid, and if I do get a podium, I'm going to consider it a win and retire probably. But I think the main factor for myself and Timu is, like someone said earlier, I think it was Scott, concentration is going to be a big factor. I think I know myself, I lose a concentration like that. I mean, 1 minute I'll be there, 1 minute I'll be talking, blabbing my mouth off, and especially for Timu as well. I think he struggles a bit on concentration, but we brought Timu in because Ollie has said himself, he sees it like I was last season, a bit crash prone, maybe, I used to cut a lot, etc. But he wants to try and mould Timu in something that maybe he's moulding me into. So Timu's not just a one-season wonder. We're not expecting him to just do one in one season and bugger off. We expect him to stay, and we're going to try and mould him into a good driver.
Okay, so I'm going to run around and ask for each of my guests here to give their opinions on where they see Woods Racing being this season. So, Lee, I'm going to start off with you. Where do you think Woods are going to be in a few words?
Midfield.
All right, that's one word will do instead of a few then. Nick, what do you reckon?
Top of midfield.
All right, and Scott, what do you reckon?
I'm going to have to go with the top end of midfield.
All right, so, well, that could be very well. That's probably where Woods have usually been. I mean, their team who have scratched and clawed to get to the top from the very bottom. Believe me, I was there when we were being ground into the dirt. And so it'll be interesting to see if they can. Well, I'm going to avoid using the Rise of the Phoenix pun because we do have Phoenix to come up in a few minutes' time anyway. So we're just going to quickly move on to constant racing. I'm going to steal a quote from Ollie and with constant by name, constant by nature. Again, Mark and David Stanton will be turning out for the team. This team has been around since 2009. It's actually co-owned by the former champion Joe Consiglio, actually, as well, with Mark Stanton. And of course, probably one of the talking points about them over the pre-season was that they've announced a deal, a partnership with Gulf that will see them running out in the famous Gulf colours for the upcoming season. But as I said, as Ollie said, constant by name, constant by nature. They had a very poor season, to be honest, despite showing some flashes. And I believe myself, if David Stanton seemed to have really come on as a driver last year when I was looking in at the broadcast. But when it came to actually scoring points, they weren't really there. So where are Constant going to be? Nick, I'm going to start with you. What do you reckon about them?
Well, it's been good talking with Mark actually over the winter period because he's actually one of the engine partners with Potentia as well. So that's good to have them on board with that. I think with last season is from what I understood from Mark is they've never really tapped in or understood setups, and I think that's one of the key areas where they both have fallen down is along the setup lines. I've seen how good both of them can potentially be. David improved last year, but I've seen how quick Mark is as well. So they just are a team full of potential. It is there, but for some reason they just can't seem to unlock that last bit that fires them up the field. And if they're able to do that, if they're able to find in the setup and adapt and learn to the setups and move with the times and move with the league in the competitiveness and have that determination within them, then they will go up the field. But at the moment, I just see them stagnating around the same sort of spot, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, they were 11th last year, and I suppose even when you take out the fact that Synergy didn't really race for half a season, they would have been of the teams returning. They were the second last one. Tom, what are your thoughts there on Constant Racing?
Yeah, I think it's the same as Nick, really. I just think they're going to stay around where they are, but not because of setups or the car. I think it's purely because we've got drivers coming in, and drivers coming in pushes people down, and it's just a shame because Mark and David really are they're brilliant guys. I mean, we've spoken to Mark a few times here on TeamSpeak, and he really is an amazing guy, but it's just a shame because you've got new drivers coming in who are quick, and I just think it's pushes them down, I'm afraid. They're quick. I won't take it away from they're quick, but I don't know what they'll be like compared to the new guys.
Right. What about you, Lee? Any differing opinions there on Constant?
Well, I mean, we're looking at the driver lineup. I'm just looking at obviously Mark Stanton. I'm just trying to find a result out now, and it was the 2011 Chinese Super League Grand Prix, where I think he took pole position. Not quite sure if he did or not, but he ran basically up in the lead for most of the race because he was in front of me, and he actually set the fastest lap in that race. So basically, Mark Stanton has been very quick in the past. Last year, he sort of dropped back a little bit. Like Nick said, he had a lot of potential, but didn't really use it in any way. David Stanton has always been, in my eyes, towards the end of the field, but I remember the Brazil Grand Prix last year. He was running in 6th and 7th place early on. The biggest problem I've seen with the Constant team over the years is the fact that their strategies are always wrong. The strategic decisions they make are very poor because they get very good positions and have to make an extra stop, which means they don't get the position they deserve. And maybe the 2011 Chinese Grand Prix, the one that I alluded to where I said Mark was leading, I think it was actually on a 3 stop as we were where me and Jason were on 2 stops. But if they made the 2-stop decision, they might have finished a bit higher up. So strategic decisions need to be looked at for that team.
And finally to Scott.
They're great guys and they are decent drivers. I think last year they just suffered a lot along the lines of what Mark Wick suffered, where they just couldn't get to grips with it. And Nick said they never really dabbled with the setups. And I think setups now, with a field as strong as it is, setup is going to be even more key than it has been in the years gone by. Matter of how well they can dive into that and get that up and running.
So it would seem we're all pretty much in agreement here. I think that Constant are going to be, as Ollie said, pretty constant and probably stay lurking near the back and trying to scrape away points. We're going to move on quickly to ST Racing, and I think we're all going to have a few words to say here. Their current driver lineup, and I say current because it seems that at least for the test driver role, it has been a bit of a carousel that would make even Pavel Lognovsky blush. But in the race car, they're going to have Miles Dixon, who will be making his Super League debut, and team owner Mark Fuller will be returning in the second car. I'm not going to even go with the second driver because they've had 6-7 drivers, is it already?
6.
6. I'm going to start with you, Tom, because you were actually involved with trying to help these guys get themselves sorted at the first test to have drivers in. What's going on?
I don't know, but I nearly bust my balls trying to get him a bloody driver for that test because where we are providing engines for them with Trinity, I really wanted them to get team because, well, if we fall behind in the R&D points, what we're going to do? We won't be able to catch up to the likes of, I don't know how to pronounce Krevda. Is it Krevda? I don't know.
Yes.
Krevda, right? Krevda, Martex, and Potentia. So if we can't fall behind this, I thought, right, I'm just going to make my hands dirty and help them get us driver. Sadly, that driver didn't work out, but they've got Morten Wennersen now, who's actually, I think, quite a good driver. He's got potential in him. He looks very quick in the Super Cup at the end, towards the end of last season. So he's they've got some. I think they've finally got some stability now. But in terms of the drivers, Miles and Mark, I hate to say it, but I think it's the weakest lineup on the grid. I hate to say it because those two, they really are amazing guys. I get on with them both very well, but I just can't see them. I hate to be harsh, but I think it's going to be a wooden spoon.
Yeah, no, I mean, this kind of touches back on what we said about GSR with Christoph. And again, I mean, it's that fine line, I think, that we're moving beyond with the league and we have in the last couple of years. I think it was something myself and Lee had a discussion in one of the race about on the broadcast, might be in Zandvoort, that we're going to a point that where we started, where it was a league where, you know, we all show up, we all have a good time, and obviously we're all taking it a bit more seriously, and the goalposts keep moving, and you see the likes of maybe Mark Wicks, who decided, okay, maybe I can't handle it in Super League, so I'm going to drop down into Super Cup and race there, and maybe have a more competitive time. That, you know, like you said, with that lineup, you're wondering, would they be better suited? Would they be more competitive? Sorry, not better suited. Let me say that in a nicer way. Would they be more competitive in the Super Cup, for example? And maybe that's, maybe they're denying two guys who could be really quick in there. Who knows? But I mean, obviously, as we've seen, trying to find drivers to fill spots has been extremely hard this year. Nick, what are your opinions there on ST Racing?
Like I've said about a couple of teams, I think they've made a mistake here as well. I think Mark Fuller should have taken a leap out of Wixie's book and potentially dropped back into Super Cup and then added two faster drivers into his team to elevate them back up the field to come maybe next year with some more resource and maybe bring himself back in. That team is just crying out for a really quick driver to have the ability to push them higher up in the field. Mark is great. He'll lap all day long. I mean, he's unbelievable just for his commitment. You cannot fault him for his commitment. But the raw speed isn't there. And I'm afraid to say it's the same for Miles, really. They need that sort of elitist drive, if you like, to either guide them or to actually race in the team, to push them and elevate them higher up the field. And if they were able to do that, they may have had a chance. But unfortunately, with what they've got there and the merry-go-round that is their reserve driver, I really don't. It is going to be wooden spoon. That's at the moment, I'd say, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's when you're going to have many drivers even before the season starts, you just kind of think. And I feel for Mark
they're wasting money though as well. Sorry, Phil, but they're wasting money along the line as well, and they don't have that sort of money to waste.
Yeah, like I mean, I do feel like Tom alluded to. Mark is a great guy. He's another guy I worked with over the years back in Woods Racing back in the day, and. Yeah, I suppose on one hand you wish him well. On the other hand, I suppose I need someone to beat this year. Lee, have you any thoughts going forward on SC Racing that haven't been said already?
Yeah, I just want to extend on something Nick just said about having a star elite driver. Last year was about, they got Tom Ely. Now, Tom Ely is a very, very quick driver. I've raced with him before. He's excellent with setups, and he's quite easily capable of winning races. He joined the SD Racing. It looked like the team was really going to take off, didn't it? I mean, we all saw things from him in testing. He was always up there fastest, setting the fast lap times. We thought, oh, great, SD are going to get somewhere. And then when it came to round one, I think he was struggling to get into the top 10 because the car simply wasn't there. And eventually he'd had enough and left because I think Tom's a bit like me in the mindset of the fact that he joined something to win. He doesn't join to finish 12th, if you know what I mean. It's not arrogance, it's just what you expect, and perhaps the team went behind him, and certainly looking at how Fuller drives on the circuit, I question his team management ability as well, because you sometimes look at him and he's the one driver in the field, apart from Timu, who I really, really do not enjoy coming up behind on track.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Because he's all over the racing line, he wanders all over the track, he can't make quick decisions on track, and to be honest, if you can't make quick decisions on the track, maybe he wasn't making the right decisions in the team, and that's why Tom Ely left. I think their moment's past.
Would you think that, I won't say because obviously we don't really work with a relegation system or anything like that, but would you think that ST are a team that, well, I know we said wooden spoon, but do you think that maybe over the course of the season they might end up spending their way into trouble with the amount of drivers they've gone through so far?
Maybe they might go in bankrupt, something like that. I mean, that's a possibility for any team, but I think, again, alluding to what Nick said about Mark Fuller and even Miles Dixon, Verneson, it'd be nice to see what you can do in a top-end car, because he was okay in the Super Cup last year. He was inside the top 10, but the two lead drivers are very questionable. I would seriously recommend the both of them to take a step back, like Nick said, possibly team up with someone with a lot of experience and learn from them, because they just really, between them, they'll not get anywhere. They'll not be able to lead each other.
Yeah, I agree with what Lee said, that they need some sort of development route, or they have to go, essentially go backwards to go forwards. They will need to drop backwards, sort themselves out, and progress back up again. Because at the moment, they're going to get stuck in a rut, and it could just turn into a phase where you'll know they will prop up the bottom of that table year on year.
Yeah, I mean, I think their best result since they've joined Super League was me back in 2010, and that was my debut, and a lot of people crashed out. So it's just to say they haven't really come on in the 4 years they've been here. So maybe it's time something in the team changed.
Right, we're going to go to Scott on this to finish up because Scott was actually tester for the team last year and he appeared for them on a number of occasions. So he can give us a little bit of an inside track onto what goes on inside ST Race, and at least was last year.
The season did start well when Tom Ely was signed and the times he was producing, and heck, even the start of my Super Cup season, which started off quite well in my eyes, was mainly down to him giving me the help that I needed to get me to where I was then. And then you see both in my Super Cup performances where I dropped off, where he disappeared and the team just declined because myself and Mark Fuller just didn't have it in us to be able to get that team any further up the grid. And Vernison is a very good driver there. I'd quite like to see what you could do if he were to ever step in as a reserve for one of them. But yeah, wooden spoon worthy at the end, I'm afraid. They are great guys there, but they've seemed to have really struggled even the last couple of years, especially with the now development of the league going from having a good time to just how committed everyone is in there and how competitive it is. It's getting harsh.
Right, we're going to move on now, and we've got 3 new teams this season. We have replacing the teams who left. We lost Red 5 Racing last year, middle of the season, they were shut down. We also lost at the end of the season J Racing and Synergetics Motorsports. So in their place, first we have returning to the league is Phoenix F1. Now I suppose as the resident old-timer here, I suppose I should go a little bit into this. Now, Phoenix did race in what was then known as the F1 VWC back in the day before the things got a bit messy in 2008, and so the league splintered into 2 directions, which eventually saw the formation of the GPVWC. Phoenix were one of those teams who stuck on the other side, for lack of a better term, and they eventually moved on to online racing through GTR2 and into our Factor through Race to Play, and have been quite a successful team over there. I know a number of drivers here like Rousey, Wixie, McConkey, and there's a good few guys who have taken part. I know I took part in one race at least for them as well over there many years ago, and sort of built themselves back up. And it was quite a surprise when we saw Andy signing up on the form and then looking to return. We were wondering if it was like a very late April Fool's joke, but in a way it's great to see Phoenix back in a way, because I know I was there when the league split and words were said, and especially when we did get divided into 2 camps, and I suppose on one hand we did see this, maybe Will was on one side and Andy was on the other, and so it's great to see after all these years Phoenix coming back home, and I suppose in a way that mending the fences that were broken all those years ago. I suppose all we need now is Carrie to come back with Finals and we'll be well sorted. In the team we see with Kieran Ryan, and he's someone who's been received a lot of critical opinions over the last year in particular, and I know Lee, you and me have had discussions about him on the broadcast at times, and we're being a bit wary. Now I know I've been spiking with Boyd, and Boyd has said that he's working hard with him to try and rebuild the motivation, but can a Leopard change his spots? Do you think Kieran is the kind of person you'd want to be leading a new team?
Well, Phoenix F1 I've heard good things of in the past. I don't know anything about Andy Graydon really. I've heard his name before, but I don't really know much about him. Looking at the driver lineup, Boyd Bryson, I know him personally from another league, which I raced against him in. And he can be very quick, but only in the Tim Tops, as Tom alluded to. Scott, I think it was. He's not really been anything special in the open wheelers so far. He's had moments of brilliance, but nothing special. And Kieran Ryan can be very quick. He can do good jobs. He can get inside the top 10 in the car that shouldn't really be there, things like that. The problem is, and I've had a lot of experience with Kieran Ryan over the past few years, as people know, he just does crazy things on circuits. I'll be honest, towards the end of last year, he started to settle down. He was one of the drivers as well, along with Mark Fuller. When you came up to lap, you really didn't know what to expect, because half the time you came to lap Kieran Ryan and he'd try and smash you off the circuit or race you, and it was just unacceptable. Towards the end of last season, you came up to lap him and he just moved out of the way, like he should. So maybe he has turned a new leaf, like you said.
All right, Nick, what are your opinions there of Phoenix?
Again, similar to what Lee just said there, I don't really know much in terms of their heritage. I know the name, but I don't really know of them previously, from what you were saying before about the split as well. Boyd has not really shown anything in terms of the open wheelers yet, but he is quick and capable in the GT cars. So if he's able to translate that, then that could be very, very promising. Kieran, I have had many a run in ever since I joined GPVWC, in fact, that have created arguments between us. On his day, he is very quick, but like Lee said, it's his racecraft, if you can even call it that at times, that is very questionable. Just wild, audacious things, and you just think, what are you doing that for? If that settles down and he calms himself down, he's able to rebuild that confidence that Boyd is hoping to do. And I probably just smashed it again. Sorry there, Kieran. But if he is able to do that, then he has the potential to really lift himself back up to where he was sort of around that 2009-2010 stage, where he was battling towards the front. But it will just depend if he's able to, because the way I see Kieran, I think he's one of these sorts of drivers that believes he should be at the front, yet isn't. When anyone else tries to come past him, he doesn't like it. If he can get sort of rid of that mentality and believe that he has to battle his way back up, he'll be pretty capable, and he'll do well, and he'll be inside the top 10 pretty consistently as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like you said, there is potential there. I know we're saying potential about the guy who's done the most race starts here, but I hope it's something that Boyd can go on. I know Kieran has different opinions, and he seems to think I'm out to get him, despite the fact I'm just doing my job in the media department. But I think that, like you said, if he can sort out the rough edges, there is a decent race driver in there. He just needs to figure that one out. To finish off Phoenix with Tom, you've driven with both these guys last year. They were within your team, and obviously have moved on to pastures new. So I'm sure you'd be kind of hoping to at least be ahead of them come the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, like everyone said, really, they are both lovely. They're both great guys. I mean, I've worked with them both last year. They're both committed. They really want to do well. I mean, I've spoken to Boyd a couple of times, and he does want. They want to do well, and fair play to them. I think I was surprised that Boyd left Woods. I'm surprised he took a drive in Super League. I thought he was going to do another season in Super Cup, but okay, he's moved up. He did do well in Super Cup last year. I think people forget he got a few top fives, and he wasn't that far off the pace in some races. So he does have the pace of the closed wheeler fame that we know he's got. Kieran, yep, okay, I beat him last season, but then I think I just had a good season. I got on well with the mod. I just put in a lot of effort, etc. But Kieran, once we got to the end of the season, he got there. He was quick. He was getting much closer to the pace. He stopped making silly mistakes. He started scoring more and more points once he settled down. Once Kieran and Boyd settled down, which I think they've done quite well, they will be quick. I think they both will be quick. I'm not sure where they'll finish in terms of positions. Maybe top 10's maybe a bit of a strong ask at the start of the season, but points are definitely there. And I've seen on live races, as I was saying earlier, I've seen a few people on there so far. Boyd and Kieran are quick. They're close to the top of the time, so they'll be one to watch, I think. It's hard to say.
Right, okay, well that was Phoenix F1. We're going to move on to the second of the new teams, and getting towards the end of this rather bumper edition of this podcast. It's Halcyon Racing, who happen to have some Irish lad called Phil Cullen driving for them, and another English lad called Adam Rouse.
Never heard of them.
Yeah, two randomers. These two randomers are probably, combined, probably have close to a good little number of years of experience. I think we've both been around for with all of the furniture in some cases. And Halcyon, we were in, I suppose I might as well talk in first person here. We were in Super Cup last year. After we initially planned to go at it from the Formula Challenge level, but we got a late call up when Drake dropped out their Super Cup team, and we decided to move up because we figured, feck it, we might as well go for the challenge on it. But it'll be interesting to see what we got ourselves into. So be nice, be gentle. Nick, be very gentle. Nick, what do you reckon? Where do you see Halcyon this year?
Well, firstly, you yourself came third, in fact, and it was Adam that came fourth. So, in terms of the progression, that was pretty much ideal, because we'll allude to Petter shortly, and Alex, obviously, they put promoted up, so it was only right that you two did. And then Roy as well. So the top 5 got promoted up. So I think it reflects, and in doing so, your entire team came up. Quite honestly, I think yourself, Phil, put in some outstanding drives last year. And if you have the confidence and the belief that you can do it in a Super League car as well, then I think you will surprise a lot of people. And I think you will surprise yourself somewhat as well in how far you'll be able to push yourself up. I know you didn't quite get the or hope for that race victory anyway in Super.
Don't mention that anymore.
But nevertheless, I think that there's a lot to be said. I mean, I know how much you do league work wise, but if you can almost translate that work onto the track as well, then you're going to be laughing in some respects in how far you'll be able to take a new team up. And as long as you get the R&D side of it right, the whole team itself getting the R&D side right, then I think you'll be it will look very promising. And in terms of Adam as well, how quick he's been, I think the combination of the two of you push each other along, and you pushed each other along to 3rd and 4th in the championship. And if you can push yourselves at that same level and even more, then you're the quiet underdogs to really start challenging that top 10.
Yeah, no, it's one thing we always said last year. I suppose by the time we'd gotten the place up in the Super Cup, Adam had already agreed to join Hawkeye for his Super Cup, and we always said, the things we could have done if we were actually teammates, especially considering how our second seat was a carousel going into it throughout the season. If you added our points together, we would have at least given CSG a run for their money for seconds. We would have been more clear third. I suppose my own concern is obviously, mostly my own concern is obviously that we have been wondering about that second seat for a while. Adam's been a bit not sure if he was going to be able to commit to a whole season now. So at the moment, I think I put the shotgun out to him and said, "You got a race now." But and I know myself, it's just trying to balance the workload. And I'll be honest with you, it's a daunting prospect. Honestly, up until late last year, I was fully expecting to race Super Cup again next year. I really wasn't kind of thinking, it was only kind of when we started logistically looking, thinking, it's a good chance to get in and build something long term, and it's something we've done with our choices of personnel and stuff going forward. That we're gone into this with long term planning in place, for as much long term planning as you can with sim racing. But I'll be lying if I said if it isn't a bit daunting. Anyway. Enough about me spouting on about the team, giving me free publicity. Lee, what do you think Halcyon are going to do this year?
Well, as Nick said, the driver lineup is pretty strong actually. Rouse last year came on very well, as did yourself. I think you've always been recognised as a driver that's been pretty quick, Phil. But last year, the one thing I noticed with yourself, Phil, was, and this is a credit point, and if you can carry that into this year, you will do very well, is the fact that your strategy decisions were very good. I remember you getting podiums early on in the season. You weren't the quickest guy out there, let's say, early on in the season, but you'd always end up finishing second or third because your strategic decisions were much better than everyone else's around you, including some of the guys who were going for the championship, like Alex Cooper. So, if you think that Alex has gone to midnight and everyone's saying, "Oh, he'll be winning races and that," you beat Alex Cooper last year in the beginning of the season on let's say quick thinking, quick feet decisions. Carry that over into the start of this year, especially with the unknown to GPVWC, the unknown weather system. Quick thinking is going to make big differences in the races. So I can see these springing a surprise early on.
Right, and we're going to go on to Tom. Where do you see Halcyon?
If there's a team that's going to recreate what GSR did in terms of shock factor, Halcyon wants to do it, because yes, Torrent, they're coming in, they're bloody quick, but people are expecting it. With Halcyon, I don't think many people are expecting you to be at the very top. I think you and Adam are both extraordinary drivers. I mean, like everyone said, 3rd and 4th in the Super Cup last year was no mean feat at all. But I would like to say you would be up there with Woods, with maybe Kernow, with Nija. You guys have got some pace, and Adam, I don't care if he doesn't want to race, he should, because he is looking extremely quick. And I really think you guys are probably dark horses for the best team of best new team.
No pressure then. All right, we'll finish up looking at Halcyon with Scott. Scott, of course, actually could have been in our test driver, could have been in one of those shiny silver cars, only the fact I ended up talking to him about 24 hours after he agreed to drive Dakar now. You regretting that choice yet?
I was almost
The answer
disappointed
is
when you
yes.
approached me too late. I was quite shocked that you'd approached me, but it didn't happen. So we'll go on to what you're doing for this season. And I think much of what I wanted to say has already been said. You can definitely spring a surprise. You've did amazing in the Super Cup last year, considering we had quite a strong field out there. And you got both Petter and Alex, who are both going to be driving in the Super League, and you were the best after those two, really, both you and Adam. So you can certainly, I think you'll surprise yourself and as well as a few others out there.
Okay, we're going to finish up with last but definitely not least. It's Torrent Motorsports, the guys who, won everything that they kind of competed in last year. I suppose the only thing they didn't come home with was a Super League trophy, and that's because they weren't in it. They were the Super Cup champions last year, and of course, Petr Kasa was the Super Cup champion. Then you have in the Formula Challenge, they won that, and the champion there was Jim Paris. Both those drivers will be headlining the team's effort into the Super League this year. Big things are expected, but can they achieve them? Lee, what do you think?
I think they'll struggle to do very, very well because of the new team situation. They'll definitely be there or thereabouts. Obviously, like you say, Torrent Motorsports, whatever they enter, they aim to win, and usually do, and usually get success in things. Looking at Simon, he knows what he's doing. Simon Mellish knows what he's doing. He's been with that team for a long, long time now. So they bonded pretty well. Looking at the driver lineup, Petr Kasa, I used to race with him years and years ago. I knew when he came to this league it'd be quick, and he was straight away. He's always going to be quick, Kasa. He's just one of them drivers. And Jim Paris was my old Formula Sim racing teammate from years ago, and he was very, very quick too. So to me, along with myself and Dave and Lucas and Alex, they are the let's say the top pairings on the grid.
So surely I think it's probably one thing we're all probably going to agree on is that Torrent are going to be probably the best of the new themes, at least. But Nick, do you think that they'll be challenging for podiums at least by the end of the season, do you think? If not sooner?
Potentially, yeah. They have drivers there. It just depends if they're able to have a good research and development, and as long as the cash works out okay for them. Petr is an unbelievably talented driver, and he has been for many years. FSR, I remember him, and even when I drove for Torrent, Petr was driving then. He's pure raw talent that guy has got, and he drives that team. And I don't think he'll ever leave Torrent, to be quite honest with you. He's been there so long now. And Jim has just come off the back of a season of FSR, in fact, as well. And he was challenging towards the front of the field. Especially in the qualifying sessions, he was very, very good. To have those two pairing is like Lee said, one of the strongest in the entire field. I think the only question that surrounds Torrent is obviously they left FSR and they didn't really go to much more of an open wheel side of racing. They decided to go down the GT side of racing and touring car side of racing, so they're coming back to more of a top end open wheel racing. I'm just wondering if they'll be able to adapt back into it, and if they'll struggle with the transition. So I doubt it, but you never know. You have to come in from a GT background for the past couple of years, so there's potential that it might not work out. But nevertheless, they have an unbelievable pairing in Petr and Jim, and it's just a case of how far they can push themselves up in preparation for what is likely to be their push title come 2014.
Yeah. Obviously, that's a very strong driver line. But Tom, do you reckon if they were to run into trouble, how deep is the pool? I know Torrent have a very deep pool, and Simon's no slouch. But we saw times last year in the Super Cup that their second seat became a bit of after Ricard had to step away for other commitments. It did, they did end up having to put in 2 or 3 different drivers throughout the season. To try them out, and with varying success or failure in some parts. So if they were to end up having to lose either Petr or Jim for any number of reasons. You know, it could be something that dints them. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you there because yes, they have a large pool of drivers, but I haven't seen many in GPVWC. I know they've got Mindaugas Columbus. I think he did a couple of races in Super Cup last year. He's quick, but I haven't seen much of him in GPVWC. So whether he will be here, should Petter or Jim go, which I think is very unlikely, he would be able to step in. But I think the main problem, I'm not sure if it's just me or I'm not sure, but Jim, I'm not sure about his motivation last year. I know he stopped doing Formula Challenge because, okay, fair enough, he'd won it by that point anyway, let's face it, but he didn't do the second half of the season practically, and when he did do Super Cup races, he didn't seem so quick. I'm not sure if that's a question of motivation, whether he didn't practice, etc., whether he didn't have the motivation to practice, but I think, like Lee said, they are one of the strongest pairings on the grid. You will see them on the podium at least a couple of times on this season. Whether it's not straight away, I don't think so. But towards the end of the season, we'll see maybe what Dave did with GSR. They'll be on the podium, maybe not winning, but on the podium for sure come the end of the season. And they will be a force to be reckoned with in 2014, that's for sure.
And finally, Scott, have you any differing opinions you want to add there on Torrent?
The only thing I have to say is I said that Midnight would have to look over their shoulders for the Nords boys, but the Nords boys are going to have to look over their shoulders for these two.
Right, so I think we're all pretty much in agreement. Torrent are going to be the best of the new teams and probably ones that we're going to see high up in the points come the end of the season. With that, I'm going to close up this rather bumper edition of the podcast. It's been a while since we've had one, but I'm sure we've made up for lost time with the length of this one. We'd like to thank you all if you managed to stick through this entire thing, and we're looking forward to what should be, on paper, has all the makings of being one of the best seasons in the GPVWC. I'd like to say thank you to Lee, Nick, Scott and Tom for joining me here, and for Dave for doing recording. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we hope to join you again pretty soon. Good night.